If you're listening in for the first time, you can find our previous episodes on iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play. Welcome to episode 7. Oh, I forgot to do Sup Nerds. Just kidding, let's try this again. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Sup Nerds! Welcome to episode 7 of Powerful, a power metal podcast. This is Fourgates speaking, and I'm here with Darko.
Hello, everyone.
Just Darko today.
Oh.
Just kidding.
It's a bit lonely here.
Just kidding. We're excited to bring you a special conversation with Judicator. We've sent 2 of our guys, LarryBiscuit and Zeldafan355, to our studio to speak with Tony Cordisco and John Yelland of Judicator. Just kidding, we don't really have a studio.
Oh, come on, Four.
Because we're not Winter Sun.
They don't need to know that. Of course we have a
I
studio.
mean, yeah, to our studio.
Our very real, non-imaginary studio. You know, the one with the microphones on the table.
Complete with the sauna in the middle of Arizona, United States of America.
Exactly.
Anyway, here's the interview.
Hello and welcome to this very special edition of Powerful Podcast. Today, me and LarryBiscuit will be interviewing 2 very wonderful gentlemen from the band Judicator. We have John Yelland and Tony Cordisco. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
Hey, I'm John Yelland, the singer of Judicator, and I'm thrilled to be here.
This is Tony. I'm the guitar player, and also thank you guys for having us on here.
And thank you for being on.
Alrighty.
I'm happy.
I'm going to say that the viewers are going to have a hell of a time trying to figure out who's who.
They already have a hard enough time with you and I.
We've got, instead of just 2 white guys, we got 4 white guys on and white guys on now.
It's going to be great.
Yeah.
All right. So, first things first, we just want to ask, what have you guys been up to recently? Any special projects going on?
John, you want to take that first, or?
Sure. Yeah, so we are getting very close to releasing The Last Emperor, which is the new album we have coming out at the end of this month. We've been working on that for, must be 2 to 3 years now. So it's going to be very, very relieving to see that get out and see what people think of it. I feel very confident about it. I know that Tony is too. But beyond that, I think we have a very rough... Tony and I don't like to... we've learned our lessons. We don't like to set goal dates, but we're hoping maybe 2 to 3 years from now we have another album out. We've already got the concept basically down. So yeah, I mean, after this, I think we're going to do a album release show, and then in between this album and next, maybe a handful of shows. Who knows?
Awesome.
Yeah,
all right.
Hit it on the head. We're mostly just working on, promoting the album and getting ready for release, and I'm getting ready to turn my home into a shipping center over here, which is funny because that's what I do for a living too. So getting all the mailing materials in place and getting all the ducks in a row, releasing content every week or so to kind of generate some hype and sending it out to the reviewers and all that. And then, we're also planning on getting warmed up for a release show and then planning the next album. Basically, it's already written musically, so we'll start learning content here probably fairly soon.
That sounds great. Do you guys have any tentative dates for that release show?
Probably end of May, beginning of June, depending on what venue availability is and what our schedules are. But that seems like with John going on tour with Dire Apparel in April, probably sticking it out a couple months and giving us some time to get practice and learn a set list here in Tucson. So probably around then, 3 months.
All right, cool. Well, I'll definitely be there.
Yeah, you mentioned John will be touring with Dire Apparel. I know John has quite a few bands that he has played with over the years.
I've started to learn I need to pace myself because as real life starts to come at me more. You know, I graduated college and now moving into full-time work and trying to become more independent. It's becoming less and less feasible to be involved with so many projects. That was really a privilege, and I cherished it, and I'm not giving up what I have, but I'm certainly not taking on any more. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, it makes sense. You don't want to overextend.
So, what all projects are you in for the people that aren't in the loop?
Oh yeah, I should clarify that. So my main gig, I would say, is Judicator, and you should be familiar with that. I'm also in Dire Apparel, which is becoming more serious, of course. We're going to be touring in April, and I'm excited for that. Then I'm also in a local band, because Dire Apparel is in California, Judicator's in Arizona. The local band I'm in is called Principium, and we have one EP out, which is pretty cool, and we are hopefully going to have an album out next year. We'll see. But that's just about it. I try to do guest vocals and whatever kind of projects come my way that I can fit in. I love being involved with everything I can.
Excellent. That's a lot of creative output. And I know Dire Apparel, that's also a project with Jason from Helion Prime, correct?
Uh-huh, yeah. He is similarly busy, but he didn't take on as many projects as I did.
You've got him beat.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're another, Helion Prime's another band that we've talked about quite a bit on here, and are going to probably try to get on at some other point. Maybe when their next album comes out.
Yeah, I've heard a little bit of their new material. I've seen a little bit of their video content that they're working on, and the next album I think is going to be pretty different, but pretty special.
Oh, you've got the sneak peek.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I know Chad, their guitarist, is out in Salt Lake too, right?
Uh-huh, love Chad.
Do you guys do anything together?
We used to be in Dysphoria together. Technically, Dysphoria is not broken up, but I would definitely say Dysphoria is not active. We have one song that we have mostly recorded. We've just been kind of sitting on our hands waiting to get the ball rolling on at least recording one last song, because it's becoming apparent that Dysphoria just is not going to come back from the ashes. But so, yeah, I mean, that's a very long answer, but just shortly, I would say no, Chad and I don't really hang out as much as I would like, but whenever I do see him, it's like good old times, and it makes me miss hanging out with him, and yeah, I miss him.
Well, I believe in your future.
He seems like a cool guy from the couple times I've talked to him.
He's a very chill guy, and he's smart, and he's talented, and he's one of the most genuinely kind people you'll meet, I think.
Excellent. So next thing we want to do is bring it back into you guys. I love praising other bands a whole bunch too. But to take it from the top, we just want to ask how you guys got into music in general, and then narrowing down to metal and power metal specifically.
Tony?
Yeah, so my metal and music origin story, I guess you could call it, is, I don't know if I'd call it weird, but I used to be really, really into like modding video games when I was younger. So I really liked this game X-Wing Alliance. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. It's one of my favorite games of all time, and I used to post on this website, X-Wing Alliance Upgrade. I swear this is relevant to heavy metal. So I used to, when I was in like 7th, 8th grade, I would always be on this modding community for this game because it was my favorite game. I was super into Star Wars, and it's a flight simulator, so that people would like design ships and upgrade the graphics and yada, yada, yada. And, you know, you'd get to talking to people on the forum, and then one of the guys, because at the time I was just into like what was on the radio. So when I was in middle school, that was like when new metal was at its height. So it was all the like Disturbed and System of a Down and all that kind of stuff. And of course I knew like the kind of the gateway metal bands like Metallica and all that, like I was familiar with them. But one of the people on the forum, he was a guitar player, and he lived in Australia. And honestly, I don't know what his real name was, but he played in a jam band down there, and they would always cover power metal songs. So they would always be playing like Halloween and Iced Earth and that kind of stuff. And he sent me the Dragonheart demo from mp3.com at the time. So it was, I forget what songs were on it, but they're the demo versions of like half the songs that ended up on Valley of the Dams by Dragon Force. And at the time I hadn't heard anything like it, and it was just so intense and so overbearing to my young, small, unmolded mind. And it blew me away, and I was like, I have to hear more of this sound. So that's when I started exploring all your, your Halloweens, your Gamma Rays, all the classic stuff that had come from. So that's how I really got into metal and power metal specifically, because it all just branched off from there. From Iced Earth came Demons and Wizards, and then Blind Guardian, and then Gamma Ray, and Running Wild, and all that good stuff. And I really gravitated towards the German power metal scene. But that spurred my whole exploring, death metal, progressive metal, everything from there all throughout high school. As far as music in general, though, goes, I'm from Bristol, Tennessee, and my uncle was a lap steel guitar player for Charlie Pride while he was still alive. He unfortunately passed away when I was pretty young, but we grew up in that kind of epicenter of country music, and he was involved with Charlie Pride. He played with Ray Charles at one point. His name was Gene O'Neill. He was a heck of a lap steel guitar shredder. So grew up in a very musical family and was exposed to it constantly as I was young. And then eventually, once I kind of found my niche with metal and power metal, I kind of took off from there and had that background, and been driving hard with it ever since.
Awesome. You run the gamut there, going from the country roots and then to Star Wars and then power metal.
It's all related.
He's another one of those Dragon Force babies too.
Yeah, just like me.
All over the place.
And what about you, John?
Yeah, for myself, I guess the best way to tell that story is I started out obsessed with the Beatles. Like, I was a super fan. And I think that molded me into kind of a very all or nothing kind of guy. And so I went from the Beatles, and I forgot how I got into Ozzy Osbourne, but at one point it was just the Beatles and just Ozzy Osbourne, and that's all I listened to. And people had offered me, I remember the person I started my very first band with, Tyler Gibson, we started Shadowseer. He tried to get me into Blind Guardian, but I was like, no, I have Ozzy, and that's like all I need. So dumb. But so I was super into Ozzy or whatever, and finally one of my friends brought over a DVD of Rock in Rio, Iron Maiden, and that was an undeniable showmanship and energy and musicianship that I could not deny. And so I was kind of converted at that point, and the internet was starting to become more democratized, for lack of a better word to put it. Like, it was more available, like forums were becoming big and everything. So I got onto the Iron Maiden forum, and of course, like I said, I was a all or nothing. So it was like, now I had Iron Maiden, the Beatles, and Ozzy Osbourne, and that was it. But at a certain point, I started to get a little bored with Iron Maiden because I had only listened to them and I had exhausted their entire discography. And so in my young teenage silly mind, I went onto the forum and I posted up like, guys, please don't hate me. Like, I'm not betraying the good word of Iron Maiden. But if I were to get into some other metal bands, like, what would I get into? And people turned me on to Gamma Ray, Halloween, and Tyr. And then I was like, oh, okay, it's not like I'm cheating on Iron Maiden. Everybody else has tons of other bands they like. And so, yeah, I power metal for me started with Gamma Ray and Halloween. And I tried to get into Tyr, and they're really cool. But I really took off with Halloween and Gamma Ray.
Awesome.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, like we said, I was a Dragon Force kid. Larry here, I think, was something similar, right?
Maiden is what did me. Yeah.
That's the gateway drug.
I think it was Metallica into Maiden into Power Quest. So piggybacking off of that, now that we know like where you guys came from into the metal scene, what are your like top 4 piece bands, and metal or not metal?
Not to make you kill your babies or anything, but
Oh boy, Tony.
Top 4 bands.
Yeah, just any band.
Top 4 bands would be Blind Guardian, Iron Maiden, Triosphere, and Metallica.
Ooh,
all good picks.
I like the Triosphere pick.
Oh yeah, they are near and dear to my heart.
How about you, John?
I would have to say Blind Guardian, Iron Maiden, Charles Bradley, Triptychon, and the Grateful Dead.
Another few good picks there. I can see with you guys both are naming Blind Guardian and Iron Maiden. I would say those guys are probably 2 of your biggest influences. Besides them, who else would you say has really influenced your music?
For me personally, my rhythm guitar playing, my number one influence is definitely James Hetfield, and that's probably a typical answer, but for me, I really took his songwriting approach to heart. And when I say his songwriting approach, I just don't mean like everybody knows James Hetfield for the the big chunky heavy fast riffs on Master of Puppets and stuff like that, but the thing I always liked about him is his ability to interweave that with cool acoustic interludes and layered guitar harmonies that are more reminiscent of like Thin Lizzy or Iron Maiden or things like that, or classical pieces. And that influenced a lot of other bands I really like in really powerful ways. So I kind of always saw that as the source of a lot of it. So his songwriting approach and then his right-hand guitar style have been very influential to me. And then outside of that, I would say definitely all the German guitar players like Rolf from Running Wild. I probably steal his riffs more than I should admit to. And then Kai Hansen for sure was a huge influence, just in his way that he mixes kind of the chunky low-end riffs with the really sort of more graceful lead guitar style. I really like his balance of lead and rhythm guitar playing. So those guys probably most of all. And then Chuck Schuldiner from Death for more technical stuff. I definitely really learned a lot from Death's music.
For me, some of this is going to sound kind of cliche, but being a rock metal singer, I think that kind of comes with the territory. But Bruce Dickinson was my gateway drug, and that led into Hansi Kirsch. And, of course, David Bowie and Freddie Mercury absolutely were a very interesting and impactful to me in my growth as a vocalist. And then I guess I would also name Rhodey Walker from Protest the Hero. Those would be my top.
Cool. Thank you very much for that insight into your guys' musical careers, I guess. Now, you did mention our Lord and Savior Hansi Kirsch. So playing off of that, we've heard that you guys met at a Blind Guardian concert in Arizona, and I'm sure you've told this story like a jillion times. Well, could you tell us that story again?
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2010, me and a buddy were driving up to see Blind Guardian in Tempe, and I hadn't seen him before. Unfortunately, I missed them the previous 2 times they were in the U.S. So it had been like, I think I'd been listening to him for 6 or 7 years, and I hadn't had a chance to see them yet. But my buddies in Seven Kingdoms, who I've known for a very long time, were on tour with them at the time. So it was kind of like a twofold nice thing. Like, oh, hey, I get to see my favorite band, and I get to see my buddies open for my favorite band. Like, this is an amazing thing that's happening. So I planned to get up there and go hang out with them a little bit beforehand. So me and my buddy, we roll up. It must have been like 1:30 in the afternoon. Which 1:30 in the afternoon in Phoenix, I mean, I don't have to tell you that's not a great time to be hanging out outside pretty much the time of the year.
Was it a summer show?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was.
Was it at the Marquee?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you know what? No, that was in December now that I'm thinking about it.
That's not bad.
Either way. not what John's used to, but I see him by himself, just hanging out in front of the venue, which nobody's there at 1:30. And I'm walking up, like calling Camden on the phone, like saying, "Hey, where are you guys?" And I just see John sitting there, and I'm like, "What? Why is this guy here so early?" And I go up and I talk to him. I'm like, "Dude, why are you here? Like, you don't need to be here to be first in line or anything." And he says, "Yeah, well, I drove down from Salt Lake, so we got here kind of early. So I'm just waiting for the show. There's nowhere else for me to be." So I basically said, "Well, I'm literally about to go backstage and watch the band sound check. So why don't you just pretend you're my friend and that you came with me, and we'll just go from there." So he just tagged along, and we went backstage, and Blind Guardian was sound checking. They were sound checking on Traveler in Time at the time, which was cool. And we just hung out with Seven Kingdoms, and like I remember, I want to say it was Andre walked by, and John's just like, "Hi, Andre," and he just like looked at him like, "Who are you?" We're just just drinking it up, enjoying the show, and talking shop with Seven Kingdoms, and then we got to talking ourselves. And he mentioned that he had been in this band Dysphoria. And he had a demo. He gave me his demo. I told him about my band at the time, Stability, which wasn't really active, but I was just telling him, like, yeah, that's what I've been doing. And, just swapped information and all that good stuff. Hung out at the show, and had an amazing time seeing Blind Guardian. And I remember at one point we were chanting for Tommy Knockers, and Hansi looks at us and he goes, "There will never be enough time for us to play that song."
Yeah, I think about how fateful that meeting was, because the only reason I went to Tempe for that tour was because I had to go on a weekend, because it was December and finals were taking place soon, and so I had to, if I was going to do it, it had to be on a weekend. There would be no other time. Like, of all the places to go, I would not go to Arizona. Nothing against Arizonans. It's just so fucking hot. But yeah, so I've thought about that a couple times. Like, man, it could have easily been because they were touring for like a month. I could have easily gone to, I think the other weekend date they had was it's on the West Coast, but there's no reason that it couldn't have taken place another weekend. So absolutely crazy, for sure. And I remember hanging out there because, like, I think Tony's right. It was like around 1:30 or 2 or so, but I was there since like 11:30. And I forget how old I was. I must have been like 22 or so. It feels really young, but I saw Hansi and some other guy walk out of the venue and go over the bridge into like the main part of town. Mm-hmm. Now's my chance to meet Hansi. I can finally do it. And I just like, no, I'm going to be like such an idiot, like running up like, "Hey, Hansi, hey." Make a fool out of myself. So no. And then Tony came and I got to go backstage and make an even bigger fool of myself. No, but it was very, very, very kind of Tony to take me in and involve me, because there was no reason that he should have, So very grateful.
Excellent. Sounds like destiny.
Yeah, that's like a movie sort of thing happening,
You can't write this.
Serendipity.
So we want to talk about a pretty recent release for you guys. Just about a week ago, if I remember correctly, you put out a re-recording of your song King of Rome and then turned this into a music video. We want to ask what made you want to re-record this particular song, and then what made you choose it for your very first music video?
For me, King of Rome has been kind of like you'll notice on our album At the Expense of Humanity, there's callbacks to it. For us, it's a very special song because, and this will get a little, I guess, maybe sentimental or philosophical. For us, it's kind of like it's our signature song for a lot of reasons. Like, one, like anytime we play a concert, it's always our closing song, and we always stop the song in the middle of it and we do a sing-along. And it doesn't matter if we've played to 30 people or 80 people. we can always get the crowd involved in it because it's so simple to sing along to. You know, all they have to do is chant the King of Rome at the key points. So we stop and we jam on that. And it's always a really, really fun experience to have a bunch of people singing that song along with us. You know, it's all smiles and fun, and it's a neat little jam. So it's kind of become our, at least among our people that have seen us live and people that know us really well and people that have followed us since the beginning, kind of our signature song. And the reason it made sense for re-recording is because the first album wasn't really an album, honestly. It was a home demo, basically, that we put online for shits and giggles. We basically, you know, me and John were like, hey, wouldn't it be funny if we recorded a power metal album? Yeah, that would sure be fun, wouldn't it? Like, that's basically how the conversation went. And I you know, I hadn't really been playing music. I was in college at the time. So I just recorded, you know, I spent a couple weeks writing songs, riffs that I hadn't really used, because up to that point I had been playing like death and thrash metal, and I had taken a little bit of a break. And I threw together this album in like 3 weeks, and recorded it on my home computer, threw some quick drums on it, to a quick little like default setting mixing and mastering stuff on it. And John threw some vocals on it over the next couple of months, and went pretty all out on the concept, because he had a whole album of music to write to, which up to that point he hadn't had a chance to do with any previous band. So basically the album wasn't really executed the way it would have been if we were in a quote unquote serious band situation, because we didn't really think anything of it. It was just like, hey, let's record a power metal album for fun and throw it online. And then when we threw it online, like, we got so much positive feedback, and like people started reviewing it on metal blogs and things like that. We didn't solicit any attention at all. We literally just put it on Facebook and pasted a download link, and our friends started sharing it around. And then, you know, the thing happens where other people start sharing it around. And all of a sudden we're getting all this, you know, great feedback. People are telling us to print physical copies. And then we did that, and we sold out like immediately of our first 100 copies of it. And it kind of just blew us away. We're like, wow, I didn't think anybody would take this seriously. So we tried a little bit harder with Sleepy Plus out, and then the rest is history from there. So to bring it back to the future, or back to the present rather, knowing that, and we've always felt really strongly about the chorus in that song, which is why we've always made sure to incorporate it in our live sets. It felt like a moment to take that song that has kind of been the heart of the band and do it right, if that makes sense. Do it the way that it was always meant to be done, rather than how it kind of was just quickly executed. Take the time to like really give it its full presentation. And that was also sort of the idea for the video. It was, all right, let's put a face and a personality to the band, and really show people like, this is what the band is. This is what it's about. It's not just a demo recording on a Bandcamp page. This is a fully realized thing. And this is its perfect form for us, what we would have wanted it to look like from the beginning, had we been in the position to. So it's kind of a full circle, almost heartwarming moment for us, to be able to do that. And then just the reactions we've gotten from people who at least are familiar with that aspect of the band, or have been following it since the beginning, or at least have read up on it, seeing them be like, wow, it's really cool to see this song finally brought to its full potential. Or even just to hear people say like, wow, I thought that song was cool before, but this is how it's meant to sound. Like, that's why we chose it, because we knew it would have that effect. And now when people come to our shows and they say like, hey, where's the CD with King of Rome on it? That last song you guys played, I want to get that one. We don't have to be like, well, we don't have that album, but you can buy our new one. Now we can give it to them like pridefully and be like, yeah, check this out. You'll really enjoy this. Not that we're ashamed of our first album or anything, but I really like those songs. But given what I know now, I would definitely do it differently. And this was the doing it differently, doing it right, at least for me.
Yeah, you guys for sure have come a long way since that first one, I think.
One of the things that really started to become noticeable on all of the shows and the tour that we did is, of course, we would close with King of Rome, and then while everybody was like tearing down the gear, I would run to the merch booth because I'm just a singer, and I would like start to work the merch booth because that's the spot when everybody wants to come buy crap. And if I had a nickel for every time that somebody would open up the conversation when it's their turn in line with which CD has King of Rome on it. And if we had any, we sold out at a certain point, but it's like, man, you want to put your best foot forward. It's like Tony said, we're not ashamed of King of Rome or Sleepy Plesso. They're great albums in their own right, but you know, production quality wise, At the Expense of Humanity was the only really like top tier album, I guess, as far as production goes. But so now at least we can refer people to The Last Emperor when people have that question.
It sounds a lot like, in my opinion at least, that King of Rome is like your guys' Valhalla. Yeah?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I would say so.
For sure.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That older song that people sing along to, and you have just like the big moment with the crowd. That totally fits.
Love it. I would like eventually, I don't know how or when, but it would be really cool. Tony and I have talked about it before, to do like maybe an EP where we re-record like a choice selection of songs from the first two albums. That would be really cool.
Or you could go all the way, just remaster the whole thing.
That's a little bit big, but who knows?
If I was going to do that for one of them, I would do it for Sleepy Plesso. I would re-record the whole thing. If I had the time and resources, I think that one would be worth it.
I just would like to do Elan and like Backs Against the Wall. Those two for sure.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Into the Sea of Bayonets as well. Those would be my top.
That's my favorite song to play live, so I would definitely like doing that one.
Yeah. We could do 3 songs from King of Rome, 3 from Sleepy Plesso.
The Judicator sampler platter.
There you go.
Yeah.
Judicator sampler confirmed here on Powerful. So this last week, actually, when I bought The Last Emperor, pre-purchased rather, I also bought Sleepy Plesso and King of Rome, because I'd never actually given them a good chance. I really, really enjoyed Sleepy Plesso, and King of Rome is rightfully rough. And then, of course, At the Expense of Humanity is streets ahead of both in terms of sound quality. While you were recording The Last Emperor, how, if it did it differ from your previous albums?
So it was very similar to how we recorded At the Expense. Similar in that we had Jordan on the drums. We engineered the drums at my house. And we had the same producer, Carlos from Dirty Viking, and then the same mastering engineer, Brett from Tower Studio. So pretty much tit for tat, the same as At the Expense. The only difference this time was we weren't in a rush. So last time we did a crowdfunding campaign for At the Expense, so we were on a tight timeline. And also we had a different band lineup. So Jordan was actually the bass player at first. He played bass on our Coping Mechanism EP, which was like a demo for At the Expense of Humanity that we used to tell people like, hey, contribute to the crowdfunding campaign. This is what the songs will sound like. Not sound like production-wise, but sound like songwriting-wise. So our original drummer played drums on that EP, and he's an old buddy of mine, and it's not that anything bad happened, but basically when it came time to record, the preparation wasn't there. And I played with Jordan a really long time, and I know Jordan is able to recognize my writing style and jam to it immediately and understand what I need him to do very quickly. So it made sense to swap them out and get Jordan on the drums last minute, basically, and burn through the drums on At the Expense. One thing you'll notice on The Last Emperors, I think Jordan's writing is much more precise and more intentional because we actually had time to sit down and write the drums to every song, whereas At the Expense was actually largely improv on the drums, minus a few choice parts. He basically just had like a general beat that I wanted him to do on most of the songs, and he jammed his way through it. But we've been doing that since we were 15 years old, so that was no problem for him. So that was probably the only difference, is that we weren't on a tight timeline. We weren't coming in at the 11th hour, so we were able to be intentional about everything from a recording standpoint. But other than that, the two albums are basically the same backing vocals, same backing vocalist, same production methods as far as how we transfer files and how we go over rough mixes and how we send feedback, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas the first two albums were basically, I would record everything to a drum machine, John would record his vocals, and then we would have somebody who is a friend put them all together for free, basically, without any sort of editing or producer kind of things like, hey, maybe you should change that part, or hey, maybe that performance isn't so good there, maybe you should retake that line. Whereas At the Expense and Last Emperor definitely had that, like, you know, if lead guitar part wasn't quite on the mark, like we had someone there to say like, hey, you should probably redo that part real quick. And then also just having it professionally mixed and mastered by people who come with a very good pedigree definitely helped us get the best out of ourselves. So, and that, well, you know, once we did it on At the Expense, that was okay. Going forward, no matter who we work with, whether we work with Carlos and Brett every time or we go to somebody else, this is the standard for how we go forward. We will always do it through these means, whoever we're working with, whoever's in the band.
Okay, cool. And just to, I guess, consolidate everything, could you tell us what the full lineup is on The Last Emperor?
Absolutely. So John is on lead vocals, of course. He also does 1/3 of the part of the choir vocals. Dave Brown from Chaos Frame is also on 1/3 of the part of the choir vocals and does guest vocals on the song Antioch. And then Carlos Alvarez, our producer, who mixed, edited, and reamped the album, also does part of the choir vocals, the same as they did on the last album. And the few minor keyboard parts that are in there, he did those as well. Mastered by Brett Caldas Lima from Tower Studio. And then I'm on all the rhythm guitar is me, all the acoustic guitar is me. And then all the guitar harmonies, the harmonized guitar parts, all the Iron Maiden stuff, basically, that's all me. And then Michael Sanchez is on the bass, and then he also has 5 or 6 guitar solos on the record. And then Jordan Elsass is on the drums. And then, of course, Hansi is on the song Spiritual Treason.
Ah, yes, of course. So next up, digging into more of The Last Emperor, were there any different things you wanted to try musically on this album as opposed to the previous ones?
For me, one thing, and sorry if I cut you off there, John. Me, what this album had to be is, I don't like bands that victory lap. So I've made a very conscious choice to myself that I will never make the same album twice in a row. And At the Expense, we did something, I think, unexpected of us with that one. It was a very personal album. The musical styles, while still, 80%, German power metal, had a lot of other things going on, a little more, I wouldn't call it straight up progressive metal, but there's definitely some proggier tendencies and proggier structures in there, and some different musical ideas in there that I might not have put in a power metal album otherwise. So I didn't want to just, the next album be like, oh, okay, well, we've got to do something tragic and personal and progressive this next time to up the ante. Like, that would have felt dishonest to me and would have felt like it would have cheapened what that album meant to us. So for me, it was, let's do something different, but still us. So I didn't want to just write King of Rome again, or write Sleepy Plessow again, or write At the Expense again. So this album kind of feels like a nice balance of all three. It's definitely 100% power metal all the way. But there's a few things going on about it that are uniquely its own, and one of those is definitely the lead guitar focus is much, much heavier on this one than any other album. There's more guitar harmonies on this than probably our 3 previous albums combined. It's all up-tempo songs. There are no songs that are slow the whole way through. There are no ballads. There are no mid-tempo songs. There's no down-tempo songs. There are ballad-esque parts, down-tempo parts, mid-tempo parts, but every song has an upbeat, straight-ahead feeling, and thus, because of that, the material's running time is shorter. So like At the Expense is almost 70 minutes long. Sleepy Plus was over an hour. This album, if you take out King of Rome, clocks in at 48 minutes. So with an approach like that, kind of more straight ahead, all guns blazing, I definitely don't want it to overstay its welcome. So we tried to cut down on the running time a little bit, basically just have a really laser focused direct approach, but also have it be very overtly power metal. And with that, we also brought back the historical themes because it seemed fitting, giving them more, I guess, more Euro power style almost. Definitely Take Up Your Cross is the most Euro power song we've ever written. It's pretty much, I think anybody that's really deeply into non-German Euro power will really like that song, but we wanted it to be different but still have all the hallmarks of why people enjoy us, which to us is mostly like the, John's vocal approach, and then I would say the guitar focus as well. So without doing the same thing, but still going in a new direction for us, even if it's not new musically, you're not going to hear us reinvent the wheel on this album, but for us, it's a different album. And I think that's what we intended to do. And I think we were very successful in doing it.
That sounds great. To me, it sounds like you guys really don't want to pull a Sabaton on this, rehash 2 songs all the time, which I think is very, very good.
I think that especially when dealing with historical topics, you run that risk. And I don't like to talk smack on Sabaton, but a lot of their lyrics focus on, they sound like Wikipedia articles sometimes.
Yeah, they'll throw a year at you and they'll throw you some army ratios, right?
So to me, what I've always looked for is the personal story within the historical occurrences. And that's what always struck me as peculiar about Sabaton is it's all about like glory and like 15,000 men and they were so brave, but it's like people are not always brave. People are not always doing the right things for the wrong reasons or doing the wrong things for the wrong reasons. I don't know, just there's so much at work with people in history, and it's a crime to sell some of these historical events and figures short. So I guess the different approach I took with The Last Emperor was, as opposed to the past 3 albums where I will make the music fit into the story idea that I have, or the time period of history that I have allotted for the album. What I did differently this time is I focused less on linear storytelling, like this happened, then this, then this, then this. Instead, I let the music tell me like what part in the story needed to be told. And so particularly with this album, I think that every song really does fit the topic.
Perfect. One thing I wanted to ask you a little bit more about was just the specifics of how you chose some of these historical topics, like Napoleon, the rise of Prussia, and now the Crusades. Are those just personal things that really stick out to you?
I like to consider myself like an amateur historian, or maybe not even that. Somebody who plays at being an amateur historian.
A fan of history.
Yeah. With King of Rome, it started out with the movie Waterloo, which is a tremendous movie, and I highly recommend it. It's an astounding movie. The scale of the battles, and it's all real. That's the incredible thing. But that movie, piqued my interest, and then I got into Empire Total War and Napoleon Total War, those video games. And so I became totally like obsessed with Napoleonic era warfare and Napoleon Bonaparte himself. And so King of Rome to me was a no-brainer. Like I had a deep need to get that passion out. But when Tony and I decided to make Judicator something serious and commit to it, and we decided, hey, let's do a second album, it was like, oh crap, well, if this is the way it's going to be, every album I can express some deep-seated passion of mine. But I was like, well, what other historical topics are there that are interesting to me? And the ones that I came up with didn't seem to fit. They didn't seem to be right. And so I took a shot, and I learned something entirely new, which was about the history of Prussia and Frederick the Great. And so that album, of course, became sort of a brief survey of the history of Prussia leading up to Frederick the Great's father, Frederick the Great himself, and that carries us through the rest of the album. I read a tremendous book, again I would recommend, called The Iron Kingdom. And to an extent, Sleepy Plesso follows the sections of that book that cover Prussia and Frederick the Great. And At the Expense of Humanity, of course, is a sort of retelling of my experience with my brother's fight with cancer that he lost, and he died. And with The Last Emperor, I think that decision was made because I saw the movie Kingdom of Heaven when it first came out in theaters, and I was like, oh, that was kind of a good movie. There was so much potential, but I don't know, man. Then I found out that the theatrical release of that movie was kind of crap because of the studio meddling with Ridley Scott's vision, and there was apparently a director's cut that was like 3.5 hours long, like something out of Lawrence of Arabia. And so I was like, okay. So I picked up Kingdom of Heaven again on Blu-ray, director's cut, and I watched that big, beefy slab of historical juiciness. And there are liberties taken, but it's probably the only good Crusader movie I've seen. There's another one, I forget what it's called. Shows you how good it was. But yeah, from that point I knew that I wanted to do it on the Crusades. And I think the first Crusade was chosen because it's the most successful Crusade, and I wanted to tell something that had a happy end for once. But of course it's bittersweet because, of course, the Crusades were absolutely bittersweet. I mean, every victory that came about in the first Crusades is just totally, in all of the Crusades, are just mired with complications, man. I mean, so much gray. You want to take one side and explore that one side, and you realize the other side were a bunch of dicks. But then you explore the other side, and you realize the same thing about the other side. I mean, there's no easy way to approach a topic like that. And so I found the topic of the Crusades to be very interesting because of that, because it presented a challenge that I had not had to face personally with any of the other albums that we've done. So it was kind of like Sleepy Plesso in that it was a new journey for me. But this in particular, because it reinforced some uncomfortable ideas that I had, but it also burned away a lot of images I had of the Crusades. So it's a fascinating topic, and I'm glad that I got to cover it in a way that I think does justice to both sides in a realistic and, I hope, balanced and respectful way.
So, the band Serenity released a album called Lionheart last year, obviously about the Crusades. Were you influenced at all by that? Were you already done writing the lyrics by that point? Was it just not on your radar? How did that influence you, if at all?
I'm going to be honest, I haven't listened to Serenity since Fallen Sanctuary. I liked some of Death and Legacy, but I stopped following them after that.
Yeah, I guess embarrassed to say it, but I've never heard the band Serenity. Sorry, guys.
Two Crusades albums I threw at John. I don't know if he listened to them at all. One was like an example of how to do historical fiction interesting, because we had talked about doing historical fiction, and then one was an example of like the cliche approach to the Crusades. So he was already familiar with it, but Angra's Temple of Shadows, which is more of like a historical fiction on the Crusades. I felt like that was a good reference point. And then I also sent him Heresy by Heresy by Paradox, because that's kind of the we talked about if you were going to do an album on the Crusades, there's like a very cliche way to do it, and that's that like, oh, religion is bad, everything sucks, humans are violent, and just kind of go for that approach. Which, I mean, all those things have rings of truth to them in ways that we definitely touch on, but Paradox is like, they're one of my favorite bands for the record, but the lyrical content on that album is very funny in how over the top, like against everything in the Crusades it is. Like, it's very much an anti in the kind of, I don't even know what the word I'm looking for is. John described it really well once in saying what he didn't want to do with the album. But I sent him that as like, I think this is what you're talking about, but hey, these riffs are really cool, so you should listen to that. I actually threw around the idea of covering one of the songs off that album. But those are probably the only reference points that I had as far as musicality. One is kind of a good example, and one is a kind of a, musically this is cool, but lyrically let's not go in that direction.
For me, I haven't heard any albums about the Crusades. I mean, Temple of Shadows apparently is about the Crusades. I never knew that. I love that album, but I never put two and two together. But I knew what I did not want to go for, and part of that was, as Tony said, one of the first ideas you might come up with is, yeah, religion is bad, religious fanaticism is bad. If you have a character in the story, you might lead him through a journey that makes him or her end up coming to atheism. And I found that was just very cliche. And like I said, that's kind of the first thing that you come up with when you think about a story like that. And in general, I found with creativity, the first idea you have is not the one you should settle on. So I thought of a different, I thought more about it. And like I said, it's such a, you got to watch where you step with a topic like this sometimes. And there's a lot of misinformation out there on the Crusades on both sides. Honestly, there really is. And so kind of what I wanted to do with this album was, look, in Sleepy Plessau, I took more of the atheist perspective. I took more of the depressing, morose kind of approach. And I think it works great for that album because that fits Frederick the Great. But this album cover is like yellow and orange, and it's more bright, and the music is more bright. And so I figured and even for myself, I just didn't want to go for something so depressing. There are absolutely those elements in the album, because no surprise, there's a lot of crazy stuff that happens in the Crusades. But I wanted to take a more nuanced approach, I guess, because the Crusades are so focused on religion, territorial claims, otherizing people, I wanted to make something that was more positive toward each side of the opposition, but more positive toward yourself too. And if you have already picked up on Spiritual Treason, that is a pivotal moment in the album because That's where I really drive home that whatever you are, you should take pride in it. Even if that means you're a Christian, even if that means you're a Muslim, whatever you are, you should take what it is and make it into the best that you can be. And so, yeah, I guess that kind of encapsulates the spirit of the album.
Right. One of my favorite bits of Spiritual Treason, I think it's towards the end of the solo, the bless both friends and enemies part, where it's like really dramatic. That was probably just my favorite part, the most powerful part of the song.
That part was a lot of fun because, and I get goosebumps thinking about it too, because that there are more moments in this album that are, I guess, symbolic or embellished, because I mean, that section doesn't have anything to do with the narrative of the story, but it's the feeling that I want to get across. And sunrise, embrace, arms outstretched, bless both friends and enemies. Like, that is the spirit that I wanted to show people, I guess.
Perfect. And just to bring that in more to some more musical style choices, something that I know is just running through your whole discography this last weekend. I wanted to ask you about you guys' use of keyboards in your songs. I noticed it's mostly used for just the occasional solo on At the Expense of Humanity. I noticed it sort of peppered in the background of the song Release Me on Sleepy Plessau. So I wanted to ask you about your general philosophy about how you use keyboards in your own bands, or even just in power metal in general.
For me, when it's appropriate, I'll use it. It just depends on what's going on in the song. So with At the Expense, I had my buddy Tyler Sherrill, or I don't know if I even said that right, on keyboards, and he was actually in the band for a while. And they were used more prominently on that album because I had his talent at my disposal. We probably split the keyboard writing half and half. So like Lucid Nightmare, for instance, has a lot of keyboards in it. I wrote all the keyboards in that song and just gave them to him to play, because I can't play the keyboard, but I can write. So I wrote out what I wanted him to do, and I gave it to him to play. But then, like the keyboards on Coping Mechanism, he just took my song and transposed keyboards all over it. And then he's also a monster of a soloist. So I'm not much of a soloist, honestly. I'll do a couple of guitar solos an album, and they're usually just like little simple leads and tricks and nonsense. I'm not much of a technical player in that department. So when I have somebody who can really just kind of let loose and shred, I really like to utilize them if I can. So Tyler definitely had that skill. And that was definitely called for on At the Expense, multiple points. So when it fits the mood, like I'll definitely use it. Like I remember one comment on Coping Mechanism when At the Expense came out, like somebody wrote, "This song sucks. It's supposed to have a guitar solo, not a keyboard solo." And I just remember laughing at that comment. I'm like, really? The reason this song sucks is because there's a keyboard solo? And I'm sitting there like, that was just a songwriting choice. You know what I mean? Like if I wanted a guitar solo there, I would have put a guitar solo there. But the song needed a keyboard solo when I wrote it. Like it felt right. And then when I heard what Tyler wrote, I was like, that is an amazing solo. That's what that song needs. So for me, it just depends on the mood. Like I'm definitely a guitar-driven metal fan. To me, metal is about the rhythm guitar. It's about the riff. That's what heavy metal is. In my opinion. I know that's not true for everybody. But whatever style of metal I'm listening to, like obviously power metal is a very vocal driven genre, but death and thrash metal really aren't. And that's a big part of my background. So the one thing that's common in all heavy metal is that backbone of the guitar riff. So I would never write in a band where that wasn't true, and that's not just my bias as a guitar player. That's just what I like in music, even in other kinds of music that I like. Even in progressive rock, like it's still very guitar oriented. Old school country, it's still very guitar oriented. That's just what I appeal to and what I enjoy. So if the song calls for it, and if I have the talent at my disposal. So on The Last Emperor, We had originally talked about orchestrating a lot of it, but honestly, it's so rhythm guitar centric and so fast and upbeat. Most of the time, the keyboards just really would have got in the way. They would have taken up too much of the headroom. And Tyler was unfortunately unavailable. So what I had thought about doing was, instead of having orchestrations or keyboard parts, like, okay, let's just use Tyler for keyboard solos, right? Because even if the music is fast and upbeat, like, you can still have him rip and let loose on some solos. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to be a part of that. But we still got Michael on the lead guitar to do some needed shredding, so that worked out. But it just depends on the situation. Sleepy Plessow had a little bit of keyboard patching going on in it, and that was just to add to the atmosphere. You know, when there's more negative space in the guitar writing, then you can really bring the keyboards out and let them shine. But when they're so busy like they are in this album, and then you throw John's choir vocals on top of them, you don't have a lot of room in the mix left for a lot of things. So you kind of have to pick and choose your battles. And on this album, we put a couple of keyboard patches on 3 songs. So The Last Emperor and It Falls to Jerusalem have a keyboard patch over the leitmotif of the album that reappears in both songs. And then The Queen of All Cities has fairly decent use of some keyboard patches throughout it. But that was, they're just to add texture at that point, since we didn't have a keyboard player at our disposal.
Okay. So it sounds like you guys generally lean a lot more towards the heavy riff-driven, you know, German, like A Night at the Opera or Battalions of Fear style, Blind Guardian, power metal style, yeah?
Absolutely.
There is another band that I've actually been drawing a lot of heavy parallels between you two with recently. Evertail. Have you guys listened to Evertail much at all?
Yeah, I'm familiar with them. I got their album when it came out, and I want to say that was 2013.
We had another one last year as well.
Oh, I didn't know that.
They are also, you guys yourself described this album as a riff-assed heavy German, something like that.
Huh.
I would definitely describe the Evertail albums as German riff-assed as well. I think they're definitely a European parallel to you guys. Same sort of general thing going on. Blind Guardian worship, early Blind Guardian worship specifically.
Yeah, for that kind of band, the newer one that I'm really into is Thornbridge. I think they're in a similar vein to Evertail and to us. Their album from I guess it's 2 years ago now, from 2016. Is definitely right up my alley for just like fast, upbeat, German riffy power metal. I'm really excited to see what they do next. I'll have to check out that second Evertail album. I wasn't aware there was another one.
Yeah, they've got their second album was really good. I know we talked about it a bit on here. Thornbridge is What Will Prevail a couple years ago was one of my favorites. They just kill it with their riffs and the choruses. So now that you guys have done 4 full albums now, or the 4th album will be released pretty soon here. I know your next objective is, you said you've already written the next album. That's impressive.
Yeah, the next album is tentatively to be titled "Let There Be Nothing," and it's going to be different again. Not different in the sense of like music overall. Again, like I said, we'll never reinvent the wheel, but different for us. I've actually been working on it piece by piece for about 5 years now. The first riff on the album, which I would say sounds most like something off of My Arms, Your Hearse by Opeth, just to give an idea. I wrote in 2013, and the whole album is only 7 songs. There's a couple of very straightforward, heavy, fast power metal songs, but a lot of it is focused on longer, more elaborate songs. And definitely it's more moody and more, it's tonally very different. I would say most of the material, if you liked songs like Lucid Nightmare and How Long Can You Live Forever off of At the Expense, it's exploring that territory much, much more heavily. And I know John has some really cool ideas he's kicking around for it. So that's kind of going to be our focus. We definitely won't write The Last Emperor again. It's still power metal. Like, it's still going to have huge choruses and big upbeat riffs and guitar harmonies all over the place, but in a different context. So I'm really excited to work on that. I know Jordan is very excited to work on it because some of the riffs and progressive parts are more in his wheelhouse for music. So it'll be exciting, but it'll be very different from The Last Emperor. So we'll take another hard right turn from here, probably.
So, you mentioned earlier that you're friends with Seven Kingdoms. Obviously, you're friends with Dysphoria and Helion Prime. So, what are your guys' other favorite power metal acts from North America?
For me, my favorite right now is probably Nova Rain. Honestly, I've been following them for a long time, and they haven't had a proper album out, but they've put out demos, and we actually were lucky enough to play a show with them 2 years ago in Long Beach. And then, of course, their guitar player, I've been following him since he was in Ex Mortis so long ago. Their new album just kicked me on my tail. It's some of the most phenomenal lead guitar playing and rhythm guitar playing I've heard from a North American band, or even just a band in general, honestly, not to undersell it. So it's my album of the year right now for sure. And that one has not left my car since I got it. And then in general, probably my other North American favorites are not to pat John on the back too much, but I really enjoy Dysphoria's The Age of Ether. That's one of my favorite North American power metal albums. And then A Sound of Thunder I revisit very, very frequently. And now I'm drawing a blank on other stuff, but those are the ones that really come to mind for the ones that are in my CD player a lot. As far as the power metal scene goes, there's a lot of other genres like Craftion from black metal scene up in Colorado. I haven't stopped listening to that since that came out. And that's Josh from Vacant Throne. He's doing that band, so somewhat related to power metal, but yeah, definitely Nova Rain is the big one lately.
Yeah, I follow like Unleash the Archers. They're very cool. Nova Rain, I love that new album. Craftion as well. That's a tremendous album. Really want to see what they do with another album. I don't think they well, no, Craftion's not power metal anyway. Necrogoblicon. Can't help but enjoy that band.
I actually just got into Necrogoblicon this week, and I had a hell of a time listening to Stench. Stench is phenomenal.
Prince of the Land of Stench. That's a great song.
The song The Feast gave me very hard Trollhaugen vibes with their like wacky breakdown.
Mm-hmm. I forget what song it is, but I love how they have played around with mixing dubstep into metal.
Yeah, for sure. That was one of the tracks at the end of the album. I don't remember which one though.
I think it's the one before Prince of the Land of Stench.
It was I think it was Necropolis.
Yeah.
Great album.
Yeah.
Necrogoblicon is really good. I'm sad that I missed them when they were here a couple weeks ago. They're apparently on Warped Tour this year, which is
that's sad.
Weird. I guess Warped Tour realized they can put metal onto the ticket after last year with Elstorm.
Oh, good.
I'm curious, did you guys manage to catch Seven Kingdoms when they were touring with Evergrey last year?
No, unfortunately, none of the North American tours come to Tucson, and very few of the smaller ones even come to Phoenix. So,
I mean, come on, they were in Phoenix, man.
Yeah, they were, but they came on a weekend, and I work weekends.
Oh, that's fair.
Yeah, my job isn't one I can just I can't take time off very easily. So, if they don't come to Tucson or on Phoenix on the day I can make, it's usually pretty hard for me to get to a show. But I remember a lot of really good tour packages didn't necessarily come here. Like I wanted to see Unleash the Archers too, and I know they came up to, maybe it was Mesa.
They were at Pub Rock
were they?
A year and a half ago, I think. That's South Scottsdale.
I wanted to go to that show, but unfortunately wasn't able to. So they grave shadow with them. It was pretty good. Oh, right on. Yeah, I unfortunately didn't really make any of the. It was like 4 or 5 really good shows in a row, and I couldn't make any of them. And I just remember being very depressed during that little stretch.
Yeah, same with Salt Lake. It's kind of out of the way. We get, I think, a decent amount of shows, but in general, yeah. I mean, Seven Kingdoms, I'm waiting for them. A Sound of Thunder, Mind Maze, Nova Rain, like some fine day.
Perfect. Maybe next time Blind Guardian comes around, they can have Judicator on, just bring everything full circle after they toured with Seven Kingdoms a few years back.
I certainly wouldn't complain about that.
I wouldn't either. I've seen them twice with Gravedigger now. I'd be happy to see you guys up there too.
I think we belong there, and I want it, and I'm going to get what is mine. Gimme! Want it.
I can respect that. Although you guys have worked with Hansi some, I know he jumped on Dysphoria's last album, and then he was on Spiritual Treason, like we talked about. So I just want to ask you about what was it like working with the man that we look up to so much, and it seems like you guys do as well.
If you had told me, like, some years ago, like, what would that be? Age of Ether. If you had told me before the Age of Ether that I would be friends with my favorite vocalist, I wouldn't have believed you. And so I feel really #blessed, really fortunate. Yeah, like we're friends, and I never would have in my wildest dreams thought that would happen. It's been really, really neat to get to know him and hang out with him a handful of times. He's a really cool guy. He's one of the most sincere, genuine people I've met in the metal world, in the music world, hands down. He's one of those few people I've met who, when he talks about caring about independent or local or unsigned musicians, it's like he means it, and he walks the walk, and he doesn't talk the talk very much, but he does a lot of walking. I know that on both occasions, because I know he's a busy guy, I have offered to pay him, and the first time he never even addressed it, but the second time with Judicator, I brought it up, and he's like, with friends, like it doesn't matter. Like I'm not gonna do it for money. So makes me want to cry, man.
I know. I was thinking about your story at when we just first started talking here. Like you're so nervous about going up to him, and now look where you are. That's so impressive. Not
impressive, just lucky.
You take what you can get.
Yeah.
The thing I'll say is I've never been one to really like to meet musicians, because I have the kind of never meet your heroes mentality. I've had bad experiences, and I won't say with who, but there have been musicians I looked up to who I interacted with either personally or professionally, and it just ruined like my view of them, or made it to the point where I can't enjoy their music anymore because I have a hard time separating that. So the thing I'll say about Hansi is he's the guy that puts that mentality like in the trash, the never meet your heroes mentality. Like, nope, he takes that, throws it away, and lives up to everything you could think. Like how hospitable he is to not just to me and John, but like I know a lot of people that obviously Seven Kingdoms had toured with them, like hearing stories about how they experienced touring with them, and just knowing his general reputation and then my personal interactions with him, like the dude lives up to what you think of when you think of your heroes. You know what I mean? Somebody you respect and even idolize for their, not just their creativity, but also their connection with their fans, and then how they professionally interact with other people. Like just a genuinely humble and nice human being, like very courteous, and invited us into their tour bus and sat down and offered us beer and just said like, sat there and shot the shit with us like it was no big deal. Didn't act like we were wasting his time or anything like that. When we talked about music, he didn't talk down to us or anything. Just very humble, very respectful. And the whole Blind Guardian family, honestly, is that way. You can tell they're a very tight-knit unit. Those people have been working together for a long time, and they do what they do extremely well. And they do it extremely personably. Like, they're just a well-oiled machine of people doing what they love. And it was honestly just really cool to get that perspective and see that and be brought along for parts of it, because like I said, I've always kind of been nervous about meeting heroes and have had bad experiences in the past. So I was kind of nervous when John Idby went to go backstage at Blind Guardian concert in 2015. And, I'm like, oh crap, I hope he's not a dick, basically. But no, he wasn't. He was the real deal. And every part of how they've treated us and now collaborated with us has just been entirely humbling. It's okay to meet your heroes sometimes, because really, truly, sometimes they are heroes. And I think with Hansi Kirsch, that's definitely the case. The dude is legit the real deal. And I'm just very humbled to have been a part of it.
You guys make Hansi and really the whole crew sound so wholesome. It really makes me happy, really, that he's like that. Now, as Zelda said earlier, you take what you can get. So how can we get Hansi, do you think?
Honestly, they're so open to their fans, and when I say they, I mean the whole band. Like, they're so personable. They're not the kind of band that, like, if you see Hansi hanging outside the venue and you go up and talk to him, like, he's not going to shoot you down. Or I've had, certain people say, like, hey, this isn't an autograph signing session, get lost. They're very approachable. They're very visible, and they don't make an effort to shy away from people. Like, when you're at a show, you can absolutely go and approach them, and shoot the shit with them, basically. And then I want to say Marcus and Frederick are both very active on social media, and very, you can chat them up anytime. They're just very approachable, whereas some musicians I know are not, or don't make themselves visible. Blind Guardian parks right outside the venue and hangs outside the bus. It's really, you just have to talk to them.
Awesome. So I know it's sort of like, that's like our wild dream for our little podcast here. And we're curious, as just one big final thing, what would you guys say are your wild dreams as musicians, or just in general?
For me, I would say the most immediate big dream is to tour with Blind Guardian. The lifelong big dream is to, if not headline Wacken, at least play Wacken.
Yeah, for me, it's my touring aspiration, and I'm admittedly not as into the touring life as other members of the band. I have a lot going on outside of music that I'm not willing to necessarily sacrifice on for just touring for the sake of touring. So John knows I'm very reserved in my goals there, which is why you won't see us play out as much as other bands. But for me, like, definitely the two things that John said, touring with Blind Guardian, or a similarly significant, as far as personally to me goes, band would definitely be an aspiration, something I would throw in all the chips for, or going overseas to play a big festival where we would be hopefully well received. So whether it's Wacken or one of the other festivals, Keep It True or something like that, I would definitely want to do that. Or playing Prog Power would be really, really cool. I don't know if we're the right demographic for that necessarily, but that's a festival I've loved and respected for a long time, and would love to be a part of that in some capacity. So for me, those two things, and then just the long-term goal would just to continue to make music that I enjoy, that I feel is executed to the best of my ability at at that time, as long as I'm always moving the needle forward for me personally and continuing to get gratification out of it, and making music that I feel is an honest representation of myself as a fan, and that I can enjoy as a fan, then I think I'll have done a good job. And yeah, that's where I'm landing.
All right. Well, thank you so much for you guys' time. We really appreciated you guys doing this for us, being on, letting us interview you.
Yeah, really, thank you guys so much.
This was Powerful Podcast interviewing John Yelland and Tony Cordisco of Judicator. Thanks for everyone listening, and keep on keeping powerful.
Thanks for having us on. This was great.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much.
That was Judicator, everyone. Be sure to check out their new album, The Last Emperor, out March 30th.
And you can find Judicator on their Bandcamp page at judicatormetal.bandcamp.com, which we will have linked in the show notes. And you can purchase that album from their Bandcamp page as well.
Send any comments and questions to Powerful Podcast on Facebook or Instagram, and stay powerful.